Been so incredibly blessed this whole day. This has been an incredible day. From morning till right now, there's more than just a sweet presence. There is a strong presence. There's the presence of the mighty. There's the presence of our resurrected King that is here. And that's what it's all about. There's the spirit of might and power Paul spoke about that's been in this place both morning and night. It's not that you try to put limits or boundaries or equations on God, but so often if there's a very powerful morning service, I don't know why, Sunday night sometimes can come up missing. I know you've never been able to figure it out, but we've been blessed with morning and night. Morning and night. We find in one of our favorite chapters of Exodus chapter 33, where God is having a correspondence with Moses. And out from Moses' heart, this is what's in his conversation. Verse 11 says that the Lord was speaking to Moses face to face as a man speaks unto his friend. 2 verses later, Moses says, "Now therefore I pray thee, if I have found grace in thy sight, show me now thy way, that I may know thee." How incredible it is for the one that finds Jesus and can stay passionately seeking him and not just be on fire at the beginning and then burn up and burn off, but the person that after the initial encounter continues to seek him. And for those that I'm speaking to like that, they understand what Moses is saying, even though it's hard for us to understand it, that the more you get to know him, that here you can cry out, "That I may know thee." And if there was anybody that knew God, I would think I would be able to put Moses in the category as one that knew God. And yet, right there in the midst of a face-to-face encounter, he cries out, "I want to know you." Others are satisfied standing at their tents, but Moses, he drew near. And the answer that was so beautiful that any man or woman could ever receive from the Father is, he said, "My presence shall go with thee, and I will give thee rest." And this was the response from Moses. And he said unto him, "If thy presence go not with me, or with us, carry us not up from hence," or from here. He's saying, I want you more than the promise of the promised land. I understand it flows with milk and honey. I understand it's an incredible promised land. But God, if you're not going, then I don't want to be there. I would rather have you than your promises. And almost as if it was by accident, he stumbles into the incredible place of that if you have him, you have his promises. And he says, if you aren't going with us, God. You see, God actually had assigned and said, "I'll let an angel go before you." And Moses says, "Thank you, but that's not good enough. I want you. And if you're not going, then I'll stay right here in the wilderness." Because smack dab in the middle of the wilderness, if you're with God, it's more important to be in the wilderness than any promised land. See, Moses' heart was captured in such a place. He knew what the true treasure was. He knew what the treasure was beyond anything else. And in Genesis chapter 15, we go back to the place of God's encounter with Abram. This is where in this exchange that he's meeting and exchanging with God through visions and through his voice. As Abram's desire more than anything else was to have a son, that was a promise of the Father that he would be the father of many nations. And yet, even though he had a promise from God, his days have gone a long time and he had not received the promise that God had spoken. And in this exchange, God says, "Fear not, Abraham. Fear not, Abram. I am thy shield." The king of Sodom had a great army, and he was letting them know, don't be concerned about him. The king of Sodom offered Abram an amazing treasure. And Abram said, "That's all right, but thank you." And God says, "I am thy shield and thy exceeding," everybody say it with me, "thy exceeding great reward." I am your reward. And you know, if you're having a face-to-face, vision-to-face, however this conversation is that you have with God, and God just says that he will be your great reward, how that would make a heart sing, how that would just, but yet you find Abram in this next verse saying, but how is it? And he starts expressing how he feels about going with a relationship with his wife and they're barren. I don't know, I've always thought in my mind in this moment how awesome the presence of God is. God just spoke. It says that the word of the Lord came unto Abram in a vision. The voice of God breaking through the unborn ages that were summoned from the womb of time, made to parade before him in his sleeping state in the midst of this vision. In the midst of all of this that's happening, you still find almost a questioning of frustration and response to the greatest thing that could ever be said. I am your great reward. And God isn't upset. God, in his mercy, doesn't slap Moses upside the head and say, "Did you hear what I just said?" "Yeah, but God, how is it that I go without a child?" "I just said I'm your great reward. I am your treasure." And I love that in this great God encounter with the patriarch, the one who's described as father of faith, that says because of his faith it was counted unto him for righteousness. Although this doesn't sound like great faith, it's amazing how God can give us something and we get credit for it. We love him because this passion, this thing that he gives to us, and it's our response because we get to give back to something that he initially gave to us. How many want to be a life of faith? One that says it's accounted unto you to righteousness, a father of faith, of inheritance of things that have never been done before, an inheritance of faith, of stepping beyond the limitations of what you've ever heard of before. This is where Abram was. I am thy exceeding great reward. Not only is he the rewarder of those who diligently seek him, but he is the reward, both the rewarder and the reward. He is our great reward. He is the very treasure. He is our treasure. And as we've been able to be a part of dealing with treasure for a couple weeks, tonight we're going to just jump into this thing called eternity. Living for eternity, laying up treasures in heaven, but greater than the promises, greater than the treasures, is the capturing of our great reward, the rewarder himself. For those must know that he is pleased by faith, and he is a rewarder of those who diligently seek him. We must believe that he is, and he is our rewarder. Everybody standing, grabbing the hand of the person next to you. Lord, even in the midst of our questions of things we've not seen that we believe for, even in the midst of maybe doubts or someone could describe as unbelief, oh God, we thank you for raising us up to places and levels of faith that we could never get to on our own. But we thank you about this thing. It's the faith of God. Lord, we thank you for drawing us and reaching us, bringing us into levels of faith that it can only be attained through your rewards, through your giving and instilling and breathing this thing called life inside of our lungs, this thing called passion, this thing called faith, this substance, oh God. Lord, that we all find this thing of the diligence stirring in our hearts, of a diligence of being a people that are finders of you, finders of our great reward, finders of the treasure that goes beyond. So tonight, as we walk in through this place, we're going to have a tunnel tonight of this thing, of eternal rewards, living for eternity tonight. As the ministry team comes, lining up on both sides, Pastor Sandy, we're walking this thing out tonight. Living, walking, like Moses saying, we want to walk with you. And if you're not going, we don't want to go. More than the promise, we want you. I love what I heard Bill Johnson say one time, as if that's a foreign statement, but you know, there's a lot of people have this false humility, this religious stench that comes out with things that sound really good. Matter of fact, I may have said it, but somewhere in the lines of saying, Lord, we seek your face and not your hand. And I love because he said, well, it's not like his hand is that far from his face. And yet, we feel as if there is a promise obtained, as a reaching for his hand, as if it's a disgrace, but yet, his hand's not far from his face. And we can be embraced by the one. And so tonight, if you're new to this, that's fine, but those who know, you just line up to this side. We're going to begin just to minister and pray for people. Lord, we just thank you for the diligent hearts, the rubbing off of diligence, oh God, in the hearts of your people, oh God, that we know that you are a rewarder, that you are the reward. With a heart that cries.